158 years. That's how long Canada has been celebrating July 1st as a birthday and nothing more. This year, the math changes. July 1st, 2026 is not one event. It's three, landing on the same calendar day, each one capable of reshaping this country on its own. A trade deal 6 years into its life, facing a make-or-break review. A pipeline proposal with a number attached to it, 1 million barrels a day, due on a federal desk, and a prime minister flying from a birthday party in Ottawa straight into a province deciding whether it wants to stay in this country at all. Let's take these one at a time because each one on its own would be the biggest Canadian story of the year. Together, they're something else entirely. Start with the trade deal, because the clock on this one has been running for 6 years already. CUSMA, the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, came into force on July 1st, 2020. Built into it is a clause, Article 34.7, sometimes called the Sunset Clause. Every 16 years, the deal expires automatically unless all three countries agree in writing to extend it. But there's a checkpoint built in at year 6. That checkpoint is July 1st, 2026, today. If all three governments confirm they want to continue, the agreement gets extended to 2042, and the next review doesn't happen until 2032. If even one country won't commit, the deal doesn't die. It just changes shape. It moves into a year-by-year review process that runs all the way to 2036, the original expiry date, with the threat of full termination hanging over every single one of those annual check-ins. Here's where it gets specific. Canada and Mexico have both already sent letters to Washington. Both want the full 16-year extension, locking the deal in until 2042. The United States has not, and Donald Trump himself said earlier this month that he is, in his own words, not looking to renew the agreement. He's called CUSMA irrelevant in public remarks. A former general counsel for the U.S. Trade Representative's office said plainly that the Trump administration is expected to walk away from a clean extension. Even if July 1st passes with no agreement, CUSMA does not collapse. It stays in force. The actual death of the deal, if it happens, is years away, in 2036, and only if nobody ever agrees to extend it before then. What July 1st actually triggers is uncertainty, not termination. A trade lawyer who used to work inside the USTR's office said it best. If the parties can't agree to extend, they'll instead negotiate over what changes might be made to address American concerns. That's not collapse. That's a longer, messier negotiation with a deadline that just moved instead of disappeared. Now to the second deadline, and this one is happening in real time as we speak. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has a pipeline proposal due to Ottawa's Major Projects Office also on July 1st. The number behind this proposal is 1 million barrels of oil per day, moving from Alberta to Canada's west coast. This deadline isn't some arbitrary date either. It comes from an actual agreement, an energy memorandum of understanding Smith and Carney signed together in Calgary back in May. Under that deal, Alberta submits its proposal by July 1st. In exchange, Ottawa commits to deciding by October 1st whether to designate the pipeline a project of national interest, with construction potentially authorized as early as September 2027. As of this week, there is still no chosen route. Alberta has been quietly weighing at least 4 different corridors through northern British Columbia, each one running into mountains, protected salmon habitat, or 2 of the region's most significant rivers, the Nass and the Skeena. There is still no private sector company attached to the project. Alberta itself has been acting as the proponent, essentially fronting the proposal because no oil company has stepped up yet to put real capital behind it. A former CEO of the Alberta Petroleum Marketing Commission said the central unanswered question is whether the pipeline is even commercially viable, because viability requires producers actually saying, yes, we want this, and that commitment hasn't materialized publicly yet. British Columbia's Premier, David Eby, remains opposed to any route that would require lifting the province's tanker ban. And more than 40 Indigenous community leaders have reportedly been consulted so far, with Alberta's Indigenous Relations Minister leading those conversations, though specific communities haven't been named, and at least one nation along a possible northern route, the Haisla, has already stated publicly that its people remain opposed to an oil pipeline and export terminal in their territory. So here's the honest state of play on July 1st. Alberta's government says it's on track to submit. Reporting indicates the bigger announcement with actual details may not land until July 2nd. The deadline itself isn't really the finish line people think it is. It's the start of a federal review clock that runs to October, which, not coincidentally, is also when Albertans are expected to vote on whether they want a referendum on separation in the first place. Which brings us to the third thing happening on July 1st, and it's the one tying the other two together. Mark Carney will be in Ottawa for Canada Day, then fly to Edmonton that same afternoon for a speech on national unity. Why does this trip matter more than a normal political visit? Because it's happening at the exact moment a major piece of his Alberta strategy lands on a federal desk, in the exact province where a referendum question about leaving Canada is on the table for the fall. Here's the bigger picture underneath all three of these stories, and it's worth saying plainly. None of this is happening by accident, and none of it is unconnected. The CUSMA review forces Canada to figure out how dependent it wants to remain on a single trading partner that's openly signaling it may not want the deal anymore. The pipeline proposal is Alberta's answer to a question it's been asking Ottawa for years. Let us build the infrastructure to sell our resources somewhere other than the United States. And Carney's trip to Edmonton is the test of whether a federal government can convince a frustrated province that staying in Canada gets it more than leaving would. These three threads share one underlying logic: diversify or be dependent. Diversify away from one trading partner or stay exposed to whatever Washington decides next. Diversify Alberta's energy markets beyond the U.S., or stay tied to a single buyer's pipeline capacity and price. Diversify the Federation's sense of fairness toward Alberta, or risk losing a province that increasingly believes it's been asked to carry the country's resource wealth without getting a meaningful say in return. 3 deadlines. 1 day. A trade relationship 6 years into testing whether it survives. A pipeline that exists on paper before it exists on the ground, and a country whose 159th birthday is being spent finding out whether all of it holds together. That's not a metaphor. That's literally what's on the calendar today. So here's what I want to know from you. Of these 3, the trade deal, the pipeline, or the unity question, which one do you think actually determines where this country is in 5 years? Let me know where you land.